We are back in Ways and Means. It's Wednesday, April 23rd. It's 10:30. We're going to continue our testimony on H483.
This is the budget.
Everything okay?
Days ago.
Great. And so Bob Burke, if you could please join us. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Robert Burke, Director, Vermont Office of Veterans Affairs.
The floor is yours, and then I imagine we'll have some questions when you're done.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I sent a read ahead, so you can hopefully have read or you can look at the narrative part. I'm going to talk about the three charts mainly. The first one is an economic impact, kind of a summary. So you've heard from Mr. DeGasta the numbers, and he's walked you through some of these numbers, and I'm going to do kind of a similar, and I'll do it kind of quickly. So estimated retirees, and so for each state, the Department of Defense Office of the Actuary produces one of these sheets. And so for each state, it tells you the number of retirees, the number of retirees receiving pay. So that 3,594, that's the number receiving pay. The 27,576, that's the average, right? For those 3,594, that's the average monthly pay, right? So if you take that total of 8,261,000 per month, right, that gives you 99,132 divided by, do the math, right, comes out to average 27,576, right? So senior enlisted, senior officers making more, those who retire 20 years, E5, E6, obviously making a little bit less. Joint Fiscal Office from 31 January 2025 reports $3.9 million for the cost of the full exemption. A couple of spending models for local spending, so that 99 and a little bit more million on an annual basis, 80% of that is being spent, 79 million, and then some a stimulated economic output model from the National Conference of State Legislatures of a multiplier of 1.5, again, an impact for local economies, 118 million on an annual basis. So that's kind of gives you a flavor of what is existing right now with income that the Department of Defense is providing to retirees that are currently receiving pay from the Department of Defense right now, as it stands right now. And Mr. DeGasta and General Harder went through the small increment of numbers over the past 10 years or so of incremental increase in the amount of retirees that the state is able to receive. The chart that I'll look at on page 2, and that kind of looks at a comparison of the retiree numbers for our New England neighbors, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Maine, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Vermont. The number of retirees, the average, again, annual retirement pay per person, again, ups, downs, this is an average, and then those total contributions. So a question came up yesterday in Senate Economic Development when somebody ran a chart as to why was the retiree population so low in Massachusetts. So I went and I did a bit of a dive.
As well, actually.
I'm sorry?
In New York.
In New York. We didn't.
Rhode Island.
We didn't run New York, but
Okay.
so I went and ran it. And so I provided you with this chart. But so if you look at the percentage of veteran population to the percentage of retiree population, that what makes it make sense, right? Their lower population of military veterans compared to their total population of retirees, that coincides. So that makes them link up.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. So Massachusetts, the percentage of population, the veteran percentage compared to the total population is one of the lowest. So their percentage of retirees is, of course, the lowest.
I mean, I don't think those two things necessarily have to be correlated, but that's,
But they do, for each of the states,
Yeah.
they do. Coincidentally,
I don't know.
well,
Okay.
the numbers do.
Okay,
Maybe by coincidence, but
yeah, I don't know.
they do. So
Give a sense of why those states that might offer better benefits than we do have a lower percentage of their population of veterans.
of retirees or in general, a lower percentage of veterans.
And retirees, both, yes.
I don't.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
I don't. If you're looking, and then if you look at the chart on the third page, you will see where Vermont and some of the other New England states, Vermont is number 43 out of 50 for annual expenditure costs. It's an expensive state. You'll see New Hampshire on there, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts sits at 49, Connecticut is 40, Maine is 38, New Hampshire is 41, Rhode Island 39, Vermont 43. It basically tells you we're in an expensive neighborhood, right? Which is not a surprise in New England. We're in an expensive neighborhood to live in. Yeah, certainly Tennessee, Virginia, South Carolina, Tennessee, some of those southern states. I've lived in some of them. The cost of living is lower, real estate is lower, taxes are lower. So they have they have an advantage. New Hampshire doesn't have an income tax, so they're a bit of an outlier. Some other states are in the same position.
Do you know how middle class is defined for this chart? So.
Yes,
Yes, broad term.
I did read it.
Okay.
Sorry, I can't quote the statistic. I do have it in here somewhere. There was an income range for the definition of middle class.
And I'm sorry, I get a little too curious about charts. I will stop asking you questions and let you finish.
No, that's fine, because I did pull it up because I said, okay, how are you defining middle class? And there was an income range. And of course, it is dependent on the state, because you really need to dig down per state to say, okay, what is middle class? Middle class in Vermont is significantly different than middle class in South Carolina, because those middle class dollars will certainly carry you a whole lot further in South Carolina than they would in Vermont.
Maybe, I don't.
Tennessee.
Right? We all have very different tax structures.
Yes,
Yeah.
but I think in general, $200,000 in income would carry you quite a bit further in South Carolina than it would in Vermont. I think that's a fair statement economically. So, I think a starting point is, as General Harder made, as a starting point is to try and retain the Guard members, the retired Guard members that we're losing. The second stage is to try and attract retirees off of active duty to come to the state. We've tried to do that from Fort Drum in New York. Department of Labor has a program that they're going, not just to get retirees, but to get people that are coming off of 4 years, 6 years, 8 years, right? Because we need labor. We need talented labor, whether it be in the construction industry, high technology, manufacturing, IT, medical fields, is to attract those populations to come here and live here and add to our economy. So I think in a nutshell, that's my presentation. I don't want to duplicate things that everybody else has already presented. I know Julian is on the line there. I didn't run the numbers, but for survivors, there's 751 survivors currently And these numbers are as of January of 2023. Those are the most recent numbers from the Department of Defense, both for retirees and survivors. Those are the most recent numbers, which for the federal government are pretty good, but they're only a couple of years old. So subject to any of your questions.
Just to spare the chair from being a broken record, I represent Berry City, and I have a lot of veterans in Berry City, but less military retirees in Berry City. And I've gotten some communications from folks who have served 6 years, 8 years, Desert Storm for 10 years, whatever it was, saying like, oh, this is great. Please vote for this because I don't want to pay taxes on my retirement. And just curious as to some of your thoughts of what other things we might be able to offer these folks that were not of that specific population, not the military retirees, that we might be able to offer them.
So I think, right. So I think as the chair had previously mentioned, there are certain programs, but so if we wanted to compete with other states, right, and we're a smaller state, so it's hard for us to do that. There are certain discounts available to certain segments of the veteran population, right? So free hunting and fishing licenses, but you have to have a federal VA disability rating of 60% or higher, right? So we could lower that. Discounts on driver's license or registrations for veterans. Again, we could lower that bar. Property tax is 50% VA rating or higher. Now that is up to individual cities or towns. The current legislation says a minimum of 10%, $10,000 reduction, up to $40,000 reduction based on the assessed value before property tax is applied. But again, that's the minimum is a 50% disability rating from the VA. So we're a small state, Massachusetts, they have state funded mental health and physical health programs just for veterans, as do some other bigger states. So I get it. We're constrained in what we can do for our standalone veteran population. It's hard to tell stubborn, stodgy veterans sometimes that we're doing the best that we can because they're looking for more. And they deserve more from, they're my clientele. They're the people that I represent.
Just to follow up on that too, I appreciate that point because it's, regardless of what we do in this room or in this body, there's nothing we can do to fully repay what they've done. So trying to target our efforts in a way that benefits the most amount of that population in the best, most effective way is something I'm interested in. So thank you.
Yeah, if I could follow up on that. I mean, I'm less interested in competing with other states and more interested in meeting the needs of the folks who are living here. And I think, what we're doing with fishing licenses and, certain DMV fees is a lovely show of respect and appreciation. I don't think it makes a market change in someone's quality of life, right? Except for that moment of appreciation, which is important. But I'm curious about things that would make a market change in someone's quality of life. I heard you talking about mental health programs that are sort of specific for veterans. Are there other things like that are less gestures and more really meeting people's needs?
Well, I think as, the old saying is, money talks and people walk. So the tax exemption, I think, would be a big start, because that is a gesture that, you're putting money where you're putting your mouth where your money is.
I think Representative Waz's next question was about veterans, the 34,000 veterans,
Mhm.
not just the limited population of military retirees who are important. I just want to make sure we're not leaving all the veterans behind.
Correct. And I think those small gestures are the best that we're going to be able to do. I mean, mental health care for the average Vermonter is near impossible, right? So the VA can provide that almost instantaneously for the general veteran population. You can walk in and get mental health help, almost instantly at White River Junction or at one of the community-based outpatient clinics.
Okay.
Where are you going to find that in the community someplace? So, I mean, for Vermont to try and establish that when it can't even provide that for its general population, that's I'm being realistic, that's a non-starter. So, I mean, carving out the small places where we can, discounts on licenses, registrations, parks, hunting, fishing licenses, the things that piss people off every day that they have to put their hand in their pocket for. I'm being honest.
Yeah, no,
You get nickel and dimed every day and it adds up.
thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Jim, it's always like right after it closes.
It was raising it as you were.
About what you just said, Madam Chair, and stuff here, and just reflecting that what we might do here, things would, well, put in several buckets. Where you left off, sir, is small gesture stuff, which is, as the chair had said, in a couple of different ways, financially doesn't amount to much. It's a gesture, but it's a gesture of our appreciation. And we have things that towns can do, like property tax exemption. Town issue, but we stretch those town by town. And then there's some of the big things, like what we're talking about today. And in this committee, regardless of our personal sentiments, we have to look at things sort of rationally and see what we can do. So what I'm looking for, and we talked about it this morning, is what provides the most benefit to the most people that are specific, that we can recognize and we can count for it, we can figure out how to do. And I'm just adding those comments in conjunction with your comments, and we've got things unstuck, I think, here to the point where we can recognize 20 years of service for what it is, and what as Jed has said, what that amounts to a bunch of people, and why, and we can accommodate that. And as far as veterans either moving or staying here, we've had testimony always over the years, and I don't think it's necessarily conclusive that it'll be to our benefit, but it might be. And it might not do us any harm, and over the years, we may find that it's going to do us a considerable amount of good, but I don't think there's any definitive way to write a paragraph that says, yeah, this is going to help because, and we'll have to, if we decide to go forward, we'll have to try it and see if it works and see if we can add other things to it.
Sure.
So it's just my comment, sir, but I appreciate you being here.
Much appreciated.
Representative Holcomb?
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you a question. I'm not sure you can answer, and I appreciate the fact that Vermonters show up at twice the rate to serve as some of our neighboring states. This is something they do. This bill, we have bills moving through the House now that are trying to encourage people to be receiving more opportunities to learn about the military in high school so that they can consider it as a viable option. And I also sent some of the memos that went out around the difference between retired military and veterans to some of the people who are reaching out to me, and many of them came back and said, oh, actually, this wouldn't apply to me. And I think of someone I know in my own town who talked about when you go away and serve and you come back, you never fully come back. And I'm mindful of that right now. And so I do feel a very strong responsibility to the other people who are putting up their hands, but maybe don't make it for 20 years for a variety of reasons, which are powerful and personal. And I'm also wondering, we're in a pretty volatile moment financially, including at the federal level. And I've heard some concern recently about whether the VA will be able to continue to provide some of those supports. And as we look down the road, you obviously don't have a crystal ball, but what are the kinds of risks that you think we ought to be anticipating as we think about what kind of commitments we make now financially?
From the state or from the
I
federal
think
side?
both. I mean, part of what we have to do is figure out how to take care of people, even if there are changes at the federal level.
So I think at the federal level,
What do we need to be thinking about as we think into the next 2 to 3 years to protect some of these individuals, these veterans, the people Teddy's talking about, the people?
to not walk away from that. I mean, you made a commitment,
Mhm.
not just the current administration, but past administrations, right? So the results of the people that are seeking services now are from the past 4 or 5 administrations, not just from the current or the most recent. It's from the past 5 or 6. And that foreign policy is not going to turn around to dictate that that's going to come to an end. I'm a realist. I'm a student of foreign policy, and it hasn't in a century and a half. So I think if we're going to make that financial commitment, which we made a significant financial commitment with the PAC Act, and that needs to be funded. I don't know another answer. And I don't know of how to save money. It's certainly, so the VA is second only to the Department of Defense in terms of bureaucracy and cost. Now, certainly, could you trim 10%, 15% off the top? Easily, as with any bureaucracy. That's easy. But when you get down to the clinician level and the provision of service level, that's where you need to stop.
Thank you. Thanks for your service and for your time here today.
Yes, yeah.
Christopher, would you like to join us?
Yes.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you for your patience and for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I've never done this before, so
Oh,
there's some kind of protocol or something.
the first step is to introduce yourself
Oh,
officially for the record, and then the floor is yours.
So good evening, Chair and members of the committee. I prepared this last night. And I asked my brothers at a time, because we're retirees too here in Vermont, and my brother-in-law, their input. So there's going to be some of their information in here as well. They want me to talk about. My name is Christopher Cunningham. I'm here today to emphasize the importance of Vermont's military retirement tax exemption. Vermont is my home, and I love the state, and that my family's here with me and my friends. That's why I want to sit in this seat, because I'm going to represent them and myself. So I'm retired from the Army. I was active duty. In 2012, I was in Florida as a ranger instructor, and I fought Ranger Branch to let me come at least close to Vermont, which 10th Mountain was the closest. Even though they offered me Italy, they offered me Hawaii, Colorado, all these places where I could, continue to do my job as a senior leader and sergeant in the Army. But it was funny when I talked to them. I'm like, hey, I want to go to Fort Drum. They're like, no, you're not doing that. Call back tomorrow. And I called back the next day, and they're like, no, we need you to go here, here, here. I'm like, no, man, I really just want to get close to Vermont. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And they sent me. I enlisted in the Army in 1998. following the legacy of my older brothers, and eventually my younger brother followed me. Over the years, I deployed over 7 times. 6 of those were in extremely harsh and demanding combat zones. And well over 4 years of my life was fighting in combat. During my deployments, I lived without basic comforts, no air conditioning, no mattress, no family to return to each night. I always had a high-risk environment, running water, electricity, prepared meals, communication with loved ones, luxuries.
Thank you.
Back in the US, my mission remained the same. I trained and mentor soldiers to defend the United States, and often the same living conditions, a little bit better in America, but all those comfort and things that people take advantage of really went missed. And it actually probably wouldn't have helped me do my job because I needed people focused without distractions. Anyways, so returning back to Vermont, my final assignment, I told you how that worked out. But my final assignment was at the University of Vermont. It's one of, I think, 2 active duty master sergeant positions in the state, where you can, actually Norwich probably has a couple more master sergeants, but only at University of Vermont. And there, everybody in that unit, we recruit high school students to, well, that's personally my job right now, is to recruit high school students to come to college in Vermont, and hopefully keep Vermonters to stay in Vermont to go to college. That's what I do now. But that job I did when I got there was the senior military instructor. So I helped develop future leaders for the Army that would eventually become second lieutenants after they commission, and go on and do bigger and better things in the active duty, the National Guard, and the reserves. If they are cadets and lieutenants, they every year they get better and better, and every year they blow the other cadets out of the water nationally. Currently, we're the top program, which is awesome. But it's really because of the seniors' outcomes, their GPA. I'm giving you a pitch right now. I'll stop.
It's good to hear.
Yeah. Where was that? Okay. I chose to come here because I wanted my kids to go to school in Vermont like I did. And finally, I was able to actually be a father and a husband that my family deserved. I can also focus on myself, my well-being, my mental and physical health. I wasn't even here a year, and the Army wanted to promote me to a sergeant major. And I declined it because I wanted to make sure that UVM ROTC was going to be good. I want to leave it better than I found it. And then I would go be a sergeant major. But when I declined it, the Army's like, well, I guess you don't want to be promoted. So just stay master sergeant. I'm like, okay. But I kind of, you only have so much time to work in certain areas, and they have to move you. So I was taking somebody's spot. So they're like, you have to retire, or we have a spot for you in Italy to be a first sergeant again. That's a lot of work being first sergeant. But I didn't want to uproot my family. We're home. Yeah. So I retired after 22 and a half years. I got a job at a hardware store in Fairfax, J&L Hardware. They're awesome. Probably one of the best boss I ever had. Oh my gosh, she's so good. And Brian, they're so great. Anyways, but the ROTC, they didn't have anybody doing my job. So they're like, we need you to come back, but as an Army civilian. So I came back. It's like a 9-to-5 job. So it's not like a 24/7 job, like an active duty soldier or a National Guard soldier. Anyway, so while I was retired, I actually joined the volunteer fire department. I started on the Westford Conservation Committee. So now I'm gonna help take care of the trails in my town. So kind of nice to be able to give back to my community, my neighbors, because I've never been able to really do that before. All right. So some family perspective. Like I said, I talked to my brothers and my brother-in-law. about their experiences as retirees and veterans. And they'd like me to bring some of these things up, and I'd like to bring it up too. My brother-in-law, Sam, he served active duty in 7 Special Forces down in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. After meeting my sister, he's like, I need to be where your sister is. So he got out of the active duty and moved to Vermont and joined the Vermont National Guard, which is awesome. But yeah, he did it. He became a command sergeant major here. Awesome guy. And then he retired. And he retired here in Vermont because my sister's here and our family's here. But he's from Indiana, and I'm sure this is Indiana. Anyways, he even deployed as a first sergeant in the Vermont Guard. Crazy. So now he's a police officer. He's like one of the lead, I don't know what you call it, the people that can tell, like the police officers that can tell if somebody's on drugs or whatever it is, the testing. He actually teaches people, other officers that now. He's teaching, I think someone in, or some people in another state right now, while he's being a sergeant for the police department down in Dover. But yes, he is planning on leaving the state because it's just too expensive. And my sister is too. So that eventually will happen. My oldest brother, not my brother-in-law, Tim, he was in the same unit as Sam, and he followed Sam essentially. He got out of active duty, went into Vermont National Guard, continued his service. He was going to be a sergeant major here, but it's kind of like me. He was in the Army too long, so you have to move up or move out. So he moved. They're like, you have to retire. So he retired. But he's a cop in Dover. And his kids are out of school. So what did he say? He said, if I'm given the right opportunity, I'm leaving. Next younger brother, Dan, he also served active duty infantry before. And then same thing as Tim, I actually tried to do this too. I guess I was in the active duty too long before. They don't want me to transition to National Guard. But anyways, so same thing with him. His son's in high school and he is leaving after his son graduates. He's a junior right now, so next year he's leaving. Way too expensive for him, and he doesn't feel supported. My younger brother, Dave, he came in after me. He was a medic in the Vermont National Guard. He did that for 8 years, deployed to Iraq. He had to do his job as a medic. And now he's a successful HVAC, plumbing, and he has a business doing this in heating in our hometown. And he's kind of a one-man show, but he's very successful. He has 3 kids, just like me. And he's here because the schools are great for our kids, but it's pretty expensive. So he's thinking about moving his business somewhere else. So look ahead, I'm probably going to leave this state as well. I love it. And it's great for my kids, but no, not for me and my wife. So I'm going to wait till my kids get out of school. I'm going to eat whatever I have to do so my kids can go to school here. And I love this state. It's too bad. Eye opener about this. So when you retire out of the Army, they tell you the best states that support veterans. And if you're a retiree, you support retirees. And when it was my turn to retire, Vermont was 49 out of 50. And California beat us for last, which didn't matter to me because I wanted to be here anyways. Meanwhile, our neighbor states, I don't have the numbers. Appreciate you doing that. But yeah, our neighbor states are higher on that list. They're telling people not to come to Vermont essentially. Because anyways, I'll keep going. In conclusion, retirement tax exemption is more than just a policy. It's a lifeline support for our veterans. attract skilled professionals like Bob was talking about, and honors their service. Vermont, if Vermont doesn't act, we'll continue to lose skilled, dedicated, selfless service individuals. Like in my office, I have active duty people in my office, sergeants and officers. They're not going to stay here. And I've seen them come and go. And they don't stay. They're like, I'm going back to Texas. I'm going back to wherever state they're from.
Where they're from.
Yeah. Like, even though they're kids, you know, the ones that have kids, they have to stay because it is really good. He's probably going to stay here until his kid's out of school, and he's, see you later. Going to go where he doesn't have property tax and all kinds of things just for being a veteran. I appreciate everything you guys are doing here. It's a tough job, and represent your people. And you know, you got to find ways to come together and make positive change for everybody. You know, I don't envy your job. I appreciate you guys doing it because it's taking your own time to do something selfless, just like military members. I also understand the general principle of tax policy and the focus on percentage more than just the category. Nevertheless, I'm urging you to make a rare exception in this particular case. For a start, I guess, hopefully, maybe something later on the road. But it'd mean a lot to everybody that's in. And people are, you know, looking to retire. Maybe they'll actually like, wow, I can actually stay here. The state cares about me. Their representatives, you know, care about them, but the state isn't coming together for them. So I appreciate you guys meeting like this to do that. And I really would like to stay here. Thanks for your time. What questions do you have?
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your family service, including your sister service in this body. And thoughts and questions from folks.
Good.
I guess my question is, in that ranking of states, what are some of the things that factor into it? Obviously, there are tax exemptions that factor into which states are desirable or not desirable for military retirees and for veterans. What are some of the other things that factor into that?
Military retirement's a big one. But there's some states that you don't have to pay tax on your home, no property tax, just for being a veteran, combat veteran. I mean, I don't expect that. That's a big thing. I know they help a little bit if you're disabled. And it is a little bit. It helps, I guess. Free tuition for the service member and their families. There's states that do that. Gosh, I think some states will even pay veterans to come be a part of their population. Just give them a stipend so they can come be part of their workforce. Yeah. That answer your question? I actually take part in hunting and fishing. That's great. Thanks for what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. You said that a couple of the reasons why people are looking to move, because it's too expensive, and it's not just the tax on military retirement pay. You mentioned property taxes, cost of living, all that kind of stuff adds up, right?
Right.
Yeah. And then the other thing you said is not enough support, and I was wondering if did you feel like that was a cultural thing, or do you feel like that's actual support services? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
I hope it's not the former, because we definitely want to
Oh,
honor
no,
our veterans and retirees. You know?
no, this state is, I got a story about that if you want to hear it. I don't know if the provost would be happy with me talking about it.
She's leaving on
Oh, yeah, she's going to be provost somewhere else. Anyway, Patty's awesome. Yeah, we had a new colonel come to take charge of our program, and I was the senior instructor. And he was like, and families ask me this all the time, like, do people actually support the military? But he was talking about, like, yes, sir, you don't have to worry about it. This is a very patriotic state. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah, I know. And I was walking him through the quad to the library, and there was a bunch of kids protesting, some. And we were in uniform. And they stopped the protest as we were walking, and everything stopped. And then one of the kids turned around and be like, thank you for your service. And then they turned around and kept protesting. And that definitely let that colonel know, like, okay, yeah, this is awesome. This is where I want to be. And they love it here when they're in that position. But they all leave because they're going to go somewhere. It's better for them.
Financially.
Financially, yeah.
Okay.
So culturally, I don't think that's an issue. And federally, like I hear horror stories from my friends and my peers and my leaders have had about VAs in different states. Like, these guys are amazing. They're like, really? You got to get in there the same day? What? Yeah, guess I just called them up. They made time. That's a good thing about this state. But it's a federal thing. And I appreciate it.
Representative Baker.
Just real quick, there's been a lot of questions about veterans benefits across, the states. And there is a website that you can get on. It's called VAClaimsinsider.com. And it'll give you state by state benefits. And of course, right off the bat, it lists top 10 states, and we certainly are in the top 10 states. But anyway, if people want to know, it has state by state listed every benefit for veterans.
Cool, thank you. That's helpful.
VAClaimsinsider.com.
VAinsider.com.
Yeah, I definitely look at that.
Anything else? Okay, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time. I really appreciate it so
I
much.
really appreciate it. Thank you for you guys doing it. Don't quit. Somebody's got to do it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
June Heston? Hi, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you. I'm just going to quickly pull up my testimony that I will submit. I got the invitation this morning. I'm in Florida, so I quickly got things together. I want to thank you, Madam Chair, and the committee members for the invitation to be here today to speak to you regarding the H-30 legislation. I'm the surviving spouse of Brigadier General Michael Heston, and I believe many of you know him from the time he served as the Deputy Adjutant General for the Vermont National Guard. I'm also the daughter of two military veterans. My parents served in World War II. They met in New Guinea and got married there. For Mike's entire career, he advocated for members of the National Guard and for their families. And I'm here today to continue to carry that torch, not only for members of the military veterans and their families, but I'm here because I'm a native Vermonter and I love this state. Throughout our history, Vermont has been a leader in treating all people with respect and honor that they deserve. And unfortunately, when it comes to our veterans and military members, I believe we're falling short, which is why I'm here to speak to all of you about the effects of this shortcoming on the ability to recruit and keep our military retirees and their spouses in Vermont. They're leaving because there's a financial benefit to do so. As you have most likely heard from other testimonies, there are many examples of these individuals. And General Harder brought up one that I want to highlight, and that's Kim Steiner and her husband, Mark, who both retired from the Vermont National Guard, and they moved to New Hampshire. I just want to point out that their grandchildren are here in Vermont. And for any of you who are grandparents, you know the significance of this decision. As you've already heard, exempting military pensions and survivor benefits from taxation in Vermont can be a smart strategy to support workforce development, bolster the state's economy, and address demographic challenges. And here's the breakdown of why this makes sense. One, attracting and retaining skilled veterans, which you've already heard about. Veterans bring valuable skills from military service, leadership, discipline, logistics, technical expertise, healthcare. By taxing their pensions, Vermont becomes less attractive compared to our neighboring states, such as New Hampshire, where people are going because there's no income tax. And retired military personnel often re-enter the workforce, starting businesses or pursuing second careers, and losing them is a missed economic opportunity. The average, you heard Bob say, the average retirement pay is $27,576. Yesterday, I looked up the median income for Vermont, and it said for an individual, it's $41,013, and the household income was $78,024. I got up-to-date data. That's about $85,000 median income now. So let's assume the average income tax rate in Vermont is approximately 6%, with the tax rate between 3.25 and 8.75. The tax gain on that retirement of $27,576 is $1,654.56. If this retiree relocates their family, including a spouse, you have a tax loss of approximately $4,681 based on the household income of 2023. That doesn't take into consideration if this family's has working age children, which means 65% of the taxable income of this family is leaving the state. Number two, boosting workforce participation. Vermont faces a shrinking and aging workforce. The state is actively trying to recruit working age residents. Survivors, like me, often spouses or dependents, are also part of this equation. Tax relief can make Vermont a more viable place for them to stay, work, and thrive. Removing this tax would encourage relocation or retention of younger working age military families. Now, many of you know my husband passed away in 2018 from pancreatic cancer that was deemed service-connected from his exposure to burn pits in Afghanistan. For more than a decade before Mike got sick, we discussed moving out of Vermont upon retirement because of the tax implication. And as a person who was born and raised there, that was not exactly what I wanted to do, but it seemed like a good financial decision. Since Mike passing, that move may become a necessity for me. I'm fortunate that Mike chose to opt into the Survivor Benefit Plan, SBP, as you've heard about, which means he contributed a portion of his paycheck to ensure I would receive the benefit. And obviously he did this not knowing how important this benefit would become. As you heard in earlier testimony, SBP provides 55% of the pension earned by service members to the surviving spouse. And the reason this is important to me is I left my job as an associate vice president at Norwich University after 2 years of trying to meet my personal obligations with my family while Mike was going through treatment and my professional obligation with my career. So for many survivors, a two-income family becomes a household of 55% of one pension. And obviously, most survivors will have to work. I'm a nonprofit professional and I started my own business after Mike lost his battle with cancer. 1 out of every 5 Vermonters work in nonprofits, and my skill set is transferable anywhere. Our adult children live in Rhode Island, one of 18 states that do not tax survivor benefits. There are 10 other states that give partial exemption on SBP, and there are 8 states that have no income tax. All of New England and New York exempt survivors from income tax. The reason this is important is we now know that toxic exposure of our veterans will result in more illness and death. These survivors will need to make a decision that's best for their financial. In addition, spouses are making many of the decisions of where to relocate after years of following a military member from post to post during their careers. Number 3, enhancing economic competitiveness. States that exempt military retirement benefits often outperform Vermont in veteran population growth and economic mobility. You've already heard that. Veterans and their families tend to spend and invest locally, housing, services, education, especially if they feel welcomed and supported. And exemptions would signal that Vermont's serious about economic development through inclusive policies. As you've already heard, an annual local spending by military members is $8.261 million. In addition, they often bring federal health care, they start second careers and establish new businesses and contribute to their communities. In addition, survivors of a service-connected loss with school-age children are eligible for dependent educational assistance, which provides educational benefits for dependents up to age 26 and for spouses for up to 10 years after a loss. This benefit could be an economic boost for our educational institutions and for our workforce with surviving spouses looking to build their skills in another career and add value to our workforce. Number 4, honoring service, building loyalty. Exempting these benefits isn't just economic policy, it's moral and strategic. Demonstrating respect for military families builds loyalty, civic engagement, and community investment. And you've already heard today that so many of these military members get involved in their community. It also improves Vermont's reputation as a veteran-friendly state, which can attract federal support and partnership. I have heard the concerns that by exempting these benefits, the expectation would be to do the same for all public servants who do good. I want to express my thoughts on this. Mike was a Vermont State Trooper for his entire career. And he also joined the Vermont National Guard early on in his career. As a trooper, he was home most days. He missed few birthdays or anniversaries. He was able to get kids to soccer practice or football practice. He even coached soccer for our kids when they were in 2nd grade. As a soldier, there were many days and months without seeing his family. He deployed for 7 months the first time, 15 months the second time, and 12 months the third time, all to Afghanistan. And he missed many birthdays and holidays. He did not see his son learn how to ride a bike.
Take as much time as you need.
Thank you. Or his daughter's freshman year of high school. Military service is a different kind of sacrifice for the service members and the family. Less than 1% of the population volunteers to serve this country, and we owe it to them to honor this commitment. Number 5, low fiscal impact and high return. The number of recipients is relatively small, so the cost to the state budget is modest. And the long-term return in tax revenue from veterans who work, buy homes, start businesses can outweigh the short-term loss. The current estimated tax loss is $3.9 million. And it sounds like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money. That is approximately 0.04%. That's 0.04% of the state's $9.06 billion budget. According to the recent data, the fiscal cost of such an exemption is relatively modest, especially when compared to economic and social benefits of retaining military retirees. It is an investment in people who've already given so much. Beyond economics and policy, this is a matter of values. Vermont has a proud tradition of service. Let's honor that by ensuring we do not burden those who serve or the families left behind. One thing Mike would often say to others is, do the right thing. sometimes in more colorful language than that. I ask you now to do the right thing. Thank you for your service to our state and your consideration of this important issue.
Thank you very much for taking the time to join us today and for you and your families with us.
Thank
Anyone on
you.
the committee have anything? Thank you very much again. Really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Folks, we're gonna take a very brief break.